Welcome to the Careers by Jenn podcast, episode 245. On this episode of the podcast, Jenn talks with Michael Voss about making purposeful career and life choices with humor. Or, in this era of pending environmental collapse, the hollowing out of the social safety net, and the gig economy, at least with some irony.
You're listening to the Careers by Jenn podcast. I'm your host, Jenn Swanson. This is the podcast that helps you to get the job, love your work, and advance your career. Careers by Jenn is a listener-sponsored podcast, and if you like the content, please consider supporting the show as a patron. You can do so for as little as $1 a month. Head over to CareersbyJenn.com and click on Support to learn more. What does it mean to choose a career with purpose? And what does humor have to do with it? These are some of the things we're going to talk about with today's guest. But before we do, here are a couple of Apple Podcast reviews. This one is entitled, A Must Listen. Thank you, Jenn, for your contribution. The future of work is changing like never before. We all need to be prepared to be proactive, to find what lights us up. The opportunities are more available than ever. And this was from Deborah Mendez, and she was writing from Great Britain. And the second one was titled, Just Follow This Advice. This is some of the most practical life and career advice I've heard in a long time. It's seasonless and industry agnostic. Do the work that Jenn recommends and you can't go wrong. I can't wait to send my career searching clients here for resources. That was from Stephanie Crivens in the United States. So thank you so much for leaving the reviews. If you would like to leave a review for the show, please go to Apple Podcasts and search Careers by Jenn in your search menu and rate and review the show. It takes just a moment to do this, and it's a way for you to show that you appreciate the time and the effort that goes into making this podcast. And you might just hear your review read on air. My guest today is Michael Voss, one half of the writing team behind the latest workplace novel called Operation Clusterfuck. That's with a P. His co-author, Jennifer Rock, was going to join us in the conversation, but then work got in the way, like it does sometimes. So Michael and I had a very fun conversation, and maybe another time we can get Jennifer on the show. Michael Voss and Jennifer Rock spent 2 decades careening through corporate America and barely lived to write about it. As company journalists, speechwriters, and C-suite advisors, they stockpiled insider stories and cautionary tales. They both live near Minneapolis, where they own a communications agency. They speak to groups of all sizes, and they share their perspectives in publications like the Washington Post. Operation Clusterfuck is their second novel, and I began my conversation with Michael by asking him about humor. Michael Voss, we're going to begin with a question. I'm going to ask you how humor can make a difference when making a career choice.
Oh, that's a great question. And thank you so much for having me on, Jenn. I think humor can make a difference. My co-author, Jennifer Rock, and I talk a lot about the importance of keeping a sense of humor. And as it relates to making a career choice, I think you really want to work with people who are fun, people who share your same values, who share your same sense of humor. And, we spend so much time at the office and so much time at work and with our coworkers. We feel like it's critical to make sure you're really working in a culture, in an environment, an organization, and with people where you can share a good laugh, because we all know there's plenty of pain and suffering, so to speak, that goes with almost any type of career. So we believe it's important to keep a sense of humor and find a place where you can express that sense of humor.
And so how can you tell? How can you tell from your research or from your interview, like where can you find out whether or not a sense of humor is present in a workplace?
Yeah, that might seem like it's really difficult to do, but actually there are a lot of ways to look for that. Part of it is just in how the company presents itself to the outside world, particularly if there's any sort of consumer marketing out there that you can look at. Do they present themselves very seriously, or do they have a little bit of lightness in how they communicate with their potential customers? I think also if you're interviewing with the company, and Jennifer and I do this even when we're working with our clients, if we're going to their office for the first time, pay close attention to the just the way it feels around the offices. When you're in the lobby, when you're talking to the receptionist, when you get walked through to the interview room, do you see people walking around with smiles on their faces? Do you get a sense of energy when you walk through the place, or is it a bit more of a hushed tones? So I think there are a number of things you can look at, and certainly through LinkedIn and Indeed and things like that, you can find people who do work for an organization or have worked for that organization, and you can reach out and use your network as well. And again, it's not all about just a sense of humor, of course, but I think that's maybe one important attribute that you would look for in an organization and in your coworkers.
And I think it's so important. I was doing a workshop the other day with an organization, and I said, if you work full time, you spend more of your waking hours of your life with these people that you're working with than you do at home. And so it's so important to have that fit. But then there's controversy between cultural fit and the idea that you should have a diverse workplace. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's, and again, the cultural fit, you're right, that can be taken too far, particularly by, probably individual hiring managers more than an organization, putting their thumbprint on and saying we must hire exactly these kinds of people. I think a good culture is welcoming of all types of individuals to be able to bring their unique selves to work. So I don't think a culture so much it rules people out as much as it should be open to inviting people to bring themselves to work and to give their best efforts and give their best ideas. And when you have that sort of open, fun, and honest and collaborative culture, that should open the door for really anybody to be able to feel like they can fit into it. And I think it's actually quite the opposite. It's the more closed, put your head down and work and don't say anything and don't ask any questions. I think those are the kinds of cultures or work environments to stay away from and be aware of, because that plays against the diversity and inclusion strategy.
So when you're going in to do this research, or you're going in as a potential employee, if you're going in and you're doing this research, or you're going into the interview, you're actually interviewing them as well.
Absolutely. And I actually had a conversation recently with a client of ours, and I was talking to a middle manager, and I wanted to get at what the culture was like. I had heard some rumors that there might be a toxic culture, the name and shame kind of culture, where if someone gets, does something wrong or makes a mistake, they get called out in front of their peers. And I wanted to understand if that was something that Jennifer and I needed to try to address through our communications consulting. And so one of the questions that I asked this middle manager was, how do the senior executives treat you, and how do they treat your colleagues? And it was really interesting. What the anecdote I was told is that she spent an entire weekend supporting a senior executive at a conference, helping her with speaking notes, etc. And she got a card mailed to her home, and it was a handwritten thank you note from that senior executive for all the time she had spent away from her family helping her out at the conference. And so I was able to quickly determine that some of the, rumors I had heard about the toxic culture were not true, or were certainly not universal.
And that's an important distinction as well, because when you take the word of someone else and base your whole decision on that person's word, that just may not be your experience.
That's very true. And the individual from whom I had heard about the toxic culture had left there, and had left under not good circumstances. So that was something I had taken into account, and again wanted to sort of gently press around the edges on that with with the people I was interviewing inside the company. And to a person, they all described certainly a high performance culture and one in which accountability was very high. But there was great respect for the employees, and there was a solid recognition program and those types of things. So again, I think it's, as you said, Jen, you really have to interview them as much as they're interviewing you. And I think really be thoughtful about the kinds of questions you can ask that get at the things that are very important to you.
Now, we've titled this episode Making Purposeful Career and Life Choices with Humor. So how does a person, like purposeful career and life choices, what do we mean by that?
Right. So I think one of the themes that Jennifer and I have explored in our books, is particularly in our second book, Operation Cluster Puck with a P, one of the themes we explore is the different ways that people approach their careers. And Jennifer and I are two great examples. Jennifer is a very ambitious person. She knew exactly what she wanted to do with her career. She wanted to be at this level, this title, this salary by this age, and sort of tracked it all the way through. And for me, I was a person who just sort of went with the flow. When the company would ask me to take a new role or do something else, I would just go ahead and do that. And I never really gave that much thought into it. So it's interesting that she and I decided to leave our jobs at the same time. We were working together at Best Buy headquarters here in suburban Minneapolis. And one of the ways that we talked about determining whether it was right for us to go out on our own and write a book and start a consultancy was, are we having fun anymore? And it just happened to pass at that point in the company's trajectory and in our career trajectories, work was no longer fun. And we decided we wanted to choose who we worked with. We wanted to choose the types of clients that we wanted to work with and be able to have fun again on the job. And I'm not picking on Best Buy here in particular. They were going through some things as a company. There was a lot of churn in the senior leadership ranks, but the job wasn't fun. And we had always been able up to that point to be able to have a lot of laughs and work hard, but have fun doing it. And that's where the sense of humor came in for our personal career decisions, where we decided it was time to leave that particular company and do something else.
So how do you come to that decision? Like, is it a niggling that was there a seed planted? Like, did you all of a sudden say, hey, let's do this? Like, what was the process there in that?
Sure. So we had a couple of different things going on in our careers and individually in our personal lives. But there had come a point where Jennifer and I, who had collaborated on a lot of different projects, shared with each other that we had each had the dream of writing a novel. Separately, growing up apart, we didn't meet, of course, until our paths crossed at Best Buy. So we had decided that we would try and write a novel together. So we had already been working on it a little bit behind the scenes, even while we were still working at Best Buy. But I think the bigger catalyst for us was when the senior leadership changed and they took an entirely different view of how we would communicate to our employees. Jennifer and I had helped build this program in which we did a great job of listening to employees, taking their concerns, their ideas, their questions about the company and bringing them directly to the C-suite, to the senior executives of the company, and then finding answers and turning around and communicating them back. The new leadership of the company was much more of a top-down, we'll tell you what you need to know, you just go off and work. And so for us, our jobs changed to the point where we just didn't have the impact and the influence that we once had. So that was the catalyst for us. But I think for every person, it's probably something different. Are you working too many hours? Is your commute taking up too much time away from your family? Has your job changed? There are probably a lot of different catalysts for different people on when you might decide to make a career change.
And I kind of wonder if it takes a certain amount of awareness, and I always wonder about that for different people, that rather than just reacting, this is how it is, this is what's happening, what's going to happen next, is that ability that you can take control, is the awareness of the fact that I do have some control, I can make choices. And I wonder how that comes to people. I'm sure it's individual, but.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we need a little nudge in that respect. And for me personally, that nudge was that I was not a happy person at home. And I wasn't running around stomping my feet and yelling at people, but I was less happy at home. And my wife called me out on it and said, you don't seem as happy anymore. Is it job related? What's going on? We had a good conversation because I thought I would end my career at Best Buy. And so it is difficult to say, as you said, to sort of look at yourself and say, I have the control to change this. And change is hard. And sometimes we don't want to leave the organization. I didn't want to leave friends there, people I worked with, people I had been, developing their careers. But eventually, again, with a good support system at home and some good self-examination, like you said, that self-awareness to say, I have options and I could get a different job, or Jennifer and I could take this leap and start our consultancy. And once you look at the various options that you have, it doesn't seem quite as scary because you don't have to choose one other thing. You can look at a variety of different things. And most of us are talented people who can apply those talents in a variety of different ways.
So when we talk about purpose, how did you come to decide to start a consultancy firm?
Well, that's a really interesting story. I'm glad you asked that, because we left first to finish the novel, and that was each of us to achieve a lifelong dream. But it's a very competitive and industry in publishing, and we quickly,
I know.
right? And we quickly learned that it is really, really difficult to make a living selling books, right? Mm-hmm. Writing and selling books, especially with two people on the same book. So we kind of stumbled into the opportunity to do some consulting through our network. Someone, a senior executive, had heard that I left Best Buy and reached out and said, hey, I have this client. We're doing some strategy work. They don't have the communications infrastructure to get this work into the organization. So we quickly formed an LLC and signed them on as a client and said, gosh, you know what, this is really fun. This is how we'll augment our income from the book sales. And that's the direction we went. And so I think to answer your question, the consulting thing was actually somewhat secondary for us, but ended up being our primary source of income once we realized, again, as I said earlier, most of us have talents that we can apply in different environments and for different organizations.
And I guess it's figuring out your purpose, figuring out what it is that you're offering to the world. And with all that you have and all the experience that you've gone through in your whole entire career trajectory, what of those things can you use to help or to further your purpose in the world?
No, I think that's exactly right. And of course, I would view my core purpose in the world as being a husband and father. But then in terms of my career, I'm a communications professional, and I want to help organizations do a better job connecting with all of their audiences, particularly those internal audiences, the employees. So when we identify that as our purpose, and then as I mentioned earlier, we made it very clear, we want to have fun on the job. We want to be able to laugh and have a sense of humor and shake our heads at the absurdities of the things we encounter every day. That's really what led us to a dual career track in terms of sharing those stories via our novels, but also really taking seriously the consulting work and helping organizations do a better job of communicating with their employees.
And how much of your novels actually, I mean, without revealing anything, but actually happen? Like, have these stories been stories that you collected over the years?
Yeah, the novel is full of stories that we've collected over the years, and so what we've done is changed the names and the situations to protect the innocent and the not so innocent. But we kicked around for a very short period of time about writing about what life was like inside Best Buy during that very tumultuous period. But what we really wanted to do was just entertain and tell stories. And we had so many beyond just our own experiences in that one company. But you have friends and colleagues, anytime you meet for a happy hour or, on the weekend, having dinner at someone's house, everybody has a story of something absurd that has happened in their lives at work. So we collected all those stories, and we created some characters, and we spun those stories and characters together to create a fictional narrative about a fictional company that we believe nearly anybody in the United States or elsewhere across the world can identify with when if they've worked anywhere at or near a big company.
Well, I'm only 30 pages in because my copy just arrived on Friday.
Okay.
And I had to work all weekend. So, yeah, so far it's really great.
Thank you. Thank you.
So yeah, I'm sorry Jennifer couldn't join us today, because it would have been fun to have her input as well. But what are you doing next as far as your own careers go?
Yeah, so that's really interesting too. And we talk about being purposeful, I'm sure, as you know, Jen, when you are an independent, either you work independently, or for Jennifer and I, it's a small 2-person agency. You're always striving for that next client. You're always striving for that next bit of business to keep you going. So Jennifer and I are in continual communication about what happens if we can't string together enough work to keep two of us sustained on an income level. So we are continuing to work with our existing clients, and we're always looking for new clients, but we keep our ear to the ground on what corporate positions might be intriguing as well. And we've said, if one of us finds a role that is just kind of the perfect career fit, there'd be no hard feelings, and that person should be free to pursue their passion and pursue their purpose. And the other one would be able to figure out what's next based on all the career experience that we have. So it's always it's an ever evolving situation, I guess, is what I would say. And we love what we're doing right now, but we don't know, or will we still be doing it in 5 years? We're going to go where the work leads us, I guess.
Yeah, and that's good, because I think the working for the same company for 30 years, I think that time has passed.
It really has. It's such a rarity now. And actually the client I mentioned earlier, that I was working with, where I was poking around to see what their culture was like, they have a really interesting blend of, it's a 100-year-old company. And so they have employees who spent their entire career there, but yet they have an entirely new management team that's trying to inject a new sense of energy and accountability into that culture. And so there's a bit of a clash there, because again, it is rare to spend your whole career at one company. So in that company, they just have a bit of a split that they're trying to address between people who said, hey, I helped build this company and I belong here, and this is the way we've always done it. And those saying, you know what, we have to try something new. We have to continually evolve.
Yeah, I've worked with a number of organizations in the past couple of years where it's the same thing. Every once in a while, there's somebody who's been there for, forever, and talks about the old days and how it was in the old days. And then there are people there who've been there for 3 months, and it's interesting to see the difference
Right.
in how they approach it.
Absolutely, and in my mind, there's value in both, right? That legacy and that history inside the company is something that is really, really valuable. But at the same time, fresh thinking and new ideas is really what can help keep an organization relevant, especially when they have been around for a long period of time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I mean, I've got kids who are in their 20s, heading to 30 and younger, and it's interesting to watch their careers and where they're progressing and what they're choosing to do, and you just kind of wonder how many iterations of career will they have.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think even for my parents' generation, it was shocking when I told them I was leaving my job and didn't have another job lined up.
I bet.
So, yeah, it's really, I think people like you and I are kind of in that middle generation where we probably spent not that full career, but some longer periods of time at companies. And I think you're right. It'll be really interesting to see the next generation of employees and how quickly they maybe move on even faster than we did.
Yeah, and I found for myself, when it was time to move on, there was a real pull. It was a real, I've been here, done this. This is great. There's nowhere else for me to go in this organization. What can I learn next? And I think to really go back to purpose, like what am I going to do with all of this knowledge and experience? Because it's not just about the pieces of paper that you have in your, educational background, but it's all of the people experience that you gather from your very, very first job as a teenager,
Right, right.
And I kind of wonder how much that factors into where you go next.
Yeah, that's a great point too. And again, I keep coming back to the fact that we all have so much to offer. And if you think about how many even great companies have been created out of nothing just by people who felt that pull that you're talking about, like, I've done all I can do here. I have a lot to offer. What should I do next? And people have created companies and created value and created jobs out of nothing more than that pull and that desire and that wish to fulfill what their purpose really is. And I think it's, again, I would never counsel anyone to leave a job if they're for the most part happy about it. But don't ignore that niggling feeling, as you said, in the back of your mind. If you feel like there's something more out there for you, explore it. And that doesn't mean you have to take the jump and leave your job the next day, but explore it, think it through, write out how you would like to write the next chapter.
And that flows perfectly into the second half of our title, which is life choices, because it doesn't, you might be a little bit bored in this phase of your career, but if the job is overall a good job and you still enjoy it and you still like it, maybe there's something outside of your career that you might choose to do that will inject a little bit of that passion and energy back into your life.
That's absolutely right. I think because jobs can be all encompassing, sometimes we lose sight of the things that could be fulfilling for us outside of work, whether that's any sort of philanthropic or charity work or volunteering. One of my favorite passions outside of work is coaching youth basketball. I've done it for both of my sons' teams, and I really enjoy it. And it's giving back in a different kind of way that people probably don't think about giving back. But we also explore that theme. I'm glad you brought it up, Jen, in Operation Clusterfuck. And our female protagonist, who has been very career driven, really realizes that she has not cultivated much of a life outside of work, and she finds a way to do that and sort of honor her father's legacy as that book unfolds. So you raise a really important point. It has to be about more than just the job and the paycheck.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't remember what the quote is, but it's working to live or living to work, whatever that quote is.
Right.
So tell us a little bit more about the books. Are they, I've only seen the one, and that's the latest one. Are the same characters in the first one?
Yes. So
Okay.
the first book is BS Incorporated, and that came out in the spring of 2016. And that was, again, our first foray into writing fiction. And we in both books, we have both a male and a female protagonist. So we toggle back and forth between their perspectives because we feel like that's a really interesting way to think about the workplace, because it can vary based on, again, whether you're a man or a woman in the workplace. And then the second book, of course, is Operation Clusterfuck. And both of them take place in a giant Midwestern company that, though well-intentioned, often gets itself into strategic predicaments in which they're maybe not quite ready to see it all the way through or figure out what happens. So we take you behind the scenes where you meet a group of middle managers led by Will and Anna, who sort of serve as your tour guides through the company. And they figure out that if anyone's going to save this company from itself, it's probably going to be them and their colleagues.
And what have you learned from doing this?
Again, I think the biggest thing I've learned is that there are so many universal experiences in the workplace. And that was certainly our hypothesis going in, is that we would write something that people would identify with. We hear from readers, and the most common refrain we hear is, it's like you snuck into my company, watched what I do every day, and then wrote a book about it. So that kind of absurdity and the gallows humor, but also the really strong and good relationships and friendships that you can build in the workplace, because, as you said, you spend so much time there, is really something that many of us either currently experience or have experienced in our work lives. And that's what we love about it, is really entertaining people and shining a light on and showing them, hey, you're not alone. We see what's going on, and we poke a little fun at it along the way.
Are Anna and Will going to have more adventures?
We believe they are. We are not currently writing the third installment, but we've kicked around some ideas and done a little strategic planning, I guess you'd say, but we are not finished.
Oh, good. Well, Michael, where can people find you?
Yeah, we like to say you can find our books anywhere that fine paperbacks or ebooks are sold. So you can find BS Incorporated and Operation Clusterfuck on Amazon, of course, and BarnesandNoble.com. You can get the ebook versions off both of those sites as well as Apple's iBooks, or you can get them direct from our distributor at rockandvossbooks.com.
rockandvossbooks.com. That's your website.
Yes, correct.
Okay. And do you have one last piece of advice for the Careers by Jenn listener?
Yeah, I think what I would say, Jen, is by all means, take your career and your purpose seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously. Have some fun along the way. Don't be afraid to smile. Don't be afraid to share your sense of humor with those around you.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's been a blast.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, Jen.
You've been listening to Careers by Jenn with Jenn Swanson. If you like what you heard, please share this. You know, if every single person listening today shared this episode with just one friend, our audience would be twice as big just like that. And the more people we can help with our content, the better. So help out a friend and help grow our audience by sharing this show with someone you know who would benefit from the content. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that, and together we can make a difference. Until next time, take good care.